You think Full Metal Jacket is just a war movie? Yeah, no. This thing is a psychological boot camp wrapped in bullets and sweat, and to top it all, Stanley Kubrick's obsession with perfection. The first half alone has scarred entire generations of film students. Shout out to Ermey's throat-shredding monologues. But what really went down behind the cameras? We bet it's even more insane than what you saw on screen. Cause this film was full of chaos and insanity. And don't even get me started on the casting switch-ups or the insane number of takes some scenes required. So buckle up for the 20 wild facts that'll make you look at Full Metal Jacket with a whole new level of respect, and of course some amount of concern. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Joker was originally going to die, but Modine convinced Kubrick otherwise. Here's a twist that could have changed Full Metal Jacket forever. Private Joker was originally supposed to die. In Stanley Kubrick's earlier script drafts, our wisecracking, peace-button-wearing protagonist was meant to get gunned down in a final sniper sequence. The sniper shoots, Joker dies. Roll credits. Classic Kubrick bleakness. But Matthew Modine wasn't having it. See, Modine wasn't just showing up to say lines. He read the script to understand Joker's arc and he had thoughts. Bold ones. So during filming, he straight up told Kubrick, "I think Joker should live." Kubrick raised an eyebrow, but Modine explained that surviving the war is worse than dying in it. Living means carrying the guilt, the trauma. Joker, after putting down that child sniper, would have to live with the aftermath, which would hit harder than a battlefield body count. And there it was, a rare Kubrickian pivot. He rewrote the ending on the spot. Joker survives and hums the Mickey Mouse Club song as the flames of war burn behind him. It's unsettling, but it's iconic. Tim Colseri was originally cast as Sergeant Hartman. Picture this. Tim Colseri, a former Marine himself, had already locked in the role of Gunnery Sergeant Hartman. He trained, rehearsed, and probably even practiced yelling obscenities in the mirror for weeks. Then enters Ermey, who is a technical advisor on the film, not even meant to be on camera. A Vietnam vet and an actual Marine drill instructor, Ermey had an intimidating aura even off the clock. When Kubrick asked him to audition just for kicks, Ermey didn't just read lines. He declared war. He screamed insults at a group of extras for 15 minutes straight without breaking a sweat or character. Oh, and he did all this while being pelted with tennis balls. Kubrick watched the footage and immediately knew this wasn't acting, and therefore, Colseri was quietly replaced. Kubrick didn't toss him out completely either though. He gave Colseri the role of the helicopter door gunner. You know, the guy casually mowing down civilians while yelling, "Get some?" But Ermey's takeover changed the entire dynamic of the film. His portrayal of Hartman was so raw that even Kubrick's notoriously perfectionist instincts couldn't argue with it. Sometimes in Hollywood, your dream role gets snatched away by a guy screaming obscenities through a cloud of tennis balls. Kubrick auditioned over 3,000 actors. Stanley Kubrick has literally been hunting through actors for Full Metal Jacket like a hawk locked on a mouse. Instead of calling in A-listers or recognizable Hollywood faces, he placed ads all across the US and Canada asking for aspiring actors to send in videotaped auditions. What followed was an avalanche of tapes. Over 3,000 people responded. That's not an exaggeration. That's an actual mountain of VHS cassettes landing on Kubrick's doorstep in the pre-email days. Of those, about 800 made it past the first line of scrutiny to Kubrick's personal desk. But why go through all this trouble? Well, Kubrick had one rule for this film: realism above all. And realism to him meant unfamiliar faces. Big stars bring baggage. Like when you see a known actor, you subconsciously bring their past roles with you. Kubrick wanted the audience to see soldiers, not celebrities. He believed these unknown actors would bleed truth on camera. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. The cast feels lived in, like these guys were ripped straight from the barracks. And even though it sounds obsessive watching hundreds of amateur tapes, we need to remember that this man is obsessed with cinema and will do anything to get it right. The shoot lasted nearly a year. You know how some directors brag about wrapping a film in under 40 days? Yeah, Full Metal Jacket laughed at that idea and said, "Hold my M16. The shoot for Kubrick's war epic dragged on for almost an entire year, starting in August 1985 and stretching all the way to August 1986. Kubrick would spend days perfecting a shot of a bootlace if he felt like it. The delays were due to several reasons, and not all of them were artistic. One major hiccup was R. Lee Ermey's accident, but more on that later. Meanwhile, over in Modine land, life was happening at full speed. Matthew Modine, Joker, not only got married during the shoot, but his wife also gave birth while filming was still ongoing. That child even celebrated their first birthday before Wrap Day rolled around. Imagine filming scenes about the horrors of war by day and blowing out birthday candles by night. It's surreal, right? This kind of extended timeline would kill most productions, but for Kubrick, it was just Tuesday. Time was a tool for him. And if it took 365 days to sculpt the perfect psychological descent into wartime chaos, so be it. Modine kept a diary and published it later. During the chaos of filming Full Metal Jacket, Matthew Modine chronicled every moment. Prompted by Kubrick himself, Modine began journaling his daily experiences on set. And these weren't brief notes. This was full-on inside-the-ring storytelling. The long days in the boot camp drill yards, the uneasy tension of shooting war scenes, the brief respites during downtime, and the growing psychological weight his character carried. Kubrick realized Modine's journals were a raw chronicle of the creative process and emotional journey behind one of cinema's most haunting war films. Years later, Modine turned those pages into a 2005 memoir titled Full Metal Jacket Diary. But he didn't stop at print. In 2012, he revolutionized the behind-the-scenes game by releasing an interactive appumentary for the iPad. Packed with more than 400 photos, audio interviews, storyboard comparisons, and on-set anecdotes, the app let fans explore Kubrick's world like never before, right from scrubbing through footage to hearing from cast and crew. What started as personal reflection became a pioneering multimedia experience that gives us both a macro and micro of Kubrick's filmmaking. Modine's diary-turned-app shows how deeply Kubrick cared about every layer: actor, audience, filmmaker. He didn't just make a war movie, he created a legacy. And thanks to Modine, we get an intimate peek at how that legacy was forged. Boot camp was brutal. Forget method acting yoga retreats and fake drills on a golf course. This was the real deal. On Full Metal Jacket, R. Lee Ermey didn't just coach actors, he became the drill instructor. He yelled at them for up to 10 hours a day, shaving their heads weekly, and denying casual off-camera chatter. He insisted that fear had to be more than a script. It had to feel like it. The recruits played by Modine, D'Onofrio, and the rest were thrown into a boot camp environment so authentic you could almost taste the tension. Ermey barked rapid-fire insults, forced them through physical drills, and reprimanded them for mistakes, big and small. You couldn't rehearse scenes, you just had to live them. The moment the camera stopped rolling, Ermey didn't let up. He kept them on edge, making sure their eyes stayed sharp, their voices stayed shaky, and their nerves stayed raw. Kubrick wanted fear to be contagious, visible in every twitch and paragraph of dialogue, and boy did he get it. This was a transformation. When D'Onofrio's voice trembles or Modine's eyes snap with suppressed panic, it's muscle memory and mental exhaustion. R. Lee Ermey filmed with broken ribs after a car crash and never complained. So now, coming to the car crash. Do you know that intense, booming voice that haunts every scene in the boot camp sequence of Full Metal Jacket? That "sir, yes sir" energy? Yeah, R. Lee Ermey delivered all that with broken ribs. Not metaphorically, literally. Here's what went down. One night, Ermey was driving through the English countryside, likely after a long day of drilling actors into the ground, and suddenly, boom, crash. His car skidded off the road and the poor man ended up with multiple fractured ribs on one side of his body. Production came to a screeching halt. Kubrick is usually notorious for his meticulous control over every frame, but even he had no choice but to pause filming for 4.5 months. Most actors would have used that time to heal, but not Ermey. When the cameras rolled again, he was still in pain, still busted up. But did he pull punches on his performance? Hell no. He was still screaming at recruits, still pacing, still channeling that terrifying drill sergeant energy that made him iconic. And guess what? You cannot tell on screen. Not one moment betrays the agony he was probably feeling with every breath. The guy was a Marine, and it showed. Kubrick leveled a London gasworks to fake war-torn Hue. You ever hear that phrase, movie magic? Kubrick's version of it involved straight-up demolition. Like real building explosions, real dust in everyone's eyeballs. When Kubrick decided to recreate the Battle of Hue, one of the most chaotic, destructive urban conflicts of the Vietnam War, he didn't go to Southeast Asia. He didn't even leave the UK. Nope. He set his sights on Beckton Gasworks, which was a huge, abandoned industrial site in East London. It was grimy, and to Kubrick's visionary brain, it was just begging to be blown to bits. For 2 solid months, a construction crew worked with explosives and heavy machinery to slowly demolish the gasworks piece by piece, sculpting it into a ruined Vietnamese city. The buildings were made to look like they'd been shelled, napalmed, and shot to hell. The place was so convincingly wrecked that US Marines who'd actually served in Hue reportedly said it looked exactly like the real thing. This was a dirty, expensive destruction, all for cinematic authenticity. So the next time you watch the film, just remember, they didn't fake any of that. That war-torn hellscape was 100% chaos, lovingly directed by a man who took realism a little too seriously. Filming on a toxic site. How does stepping onto an abandoned industrial site to film a war movie and discovering it's literally poisonous sound to you? That's what happened at Beckton Gasworks, London, where Full Metal Jacket shot its Vietnam segments. This place was a chemical graveyard. Once a massive gas plant, it leaked coal tar, benzene, asbestos, and dozens of carcinogens into the soil and air. Matthew Modine would later call it one of the most toxic places I've ever been in my life. During filming, cast and crew reported illness, likely from breathing that toxic air. Yet here's where it gets surreal. After a hard day of running through trenches and explosions, some actors discovered their bathwater turned cobalt blue as the chemicals came off from their bodies. Production didn't stop though. Kubrick was determined to capture those smoky, ruined streets, even if it meant exposing his cast to real risk. Modine's cough lingered long after the camera shut down, and many crew members later reported health issues. Annual screenings reportedly required hazard signs since this filming location blurred the lines between method acting and actual health hazards. Watching Full Metal Jacket, you see filth on Joker's jacket, but off camera, that filth was seeping into lungs and bathtubs. A Vietnam in England. Now, the film wasn't shot in Vietnam, it was shot in England, but Kubrick made the Thames look like the Mekong. He imported 200 real palm trees from Spain and had thousands of plastic tropical plants shipped from Hong Kong, ensuring every frame felt like Southeast Asia. But why the real palms, you say? Well, because fake ones look fake. Kubrick famously rejected earlier plastic foliage from California, calling it too artificial. So he had production designer Anton Furst scour European tree farms, selecting tall, lush palms that could survive a transplant to the London sound stages. Then they shipped thousands of plastic ferns and vines just to fill in the gaps. Every corner teemed with greenery. The result on screen is dense jungle, shadowed pathways, palm fronds brushing against helmets, just complete atmospheric immersion. We feel the humidity, even though London was probably chilly during filming. This botanical feat obviously wasn't cheap, but for Kubrick, it was essential. He didn't want silhouettes against gray backdrops. He wanted the full Vietnam right there. The imported palms rustled in the breeze, but the plastic vines catch the light, and thus, the illusion sticks. Cinematographer Douglas Milsom used ultra-wide still lenses like a mad scientist with a camera obsession. You know how Stanley Kubrick was a visual tyrant, right? The guy obsessed over every pixel before that was even a thing. For Full Metal Jacket, Kubrick teamed up with cinematographer Douglas Milsom, and together they went down a lens rabbit hole. They bought every single Nikon still lens they could get their hands on. Nikon had these still photography lenses that had an ultra-wide field and insane clarity. He loved that pin-sharp precision, especially for tight interiors and those brutally crisp wide shots. But they didn't just get these lenses and call it a day. No. Kubrick, being Kubrick, had a custom viewfinder built from scratch to properly compose his shots with these unconventional lenses. Imagine building your own tools just because nothing else is good enough for your vision. What would you call it? Dedication or obsession? In the barracks or on the battlefield, everything feels like it's closing in on you. It pulls you into the madness without you even realizing it. It's not flashy or handheld chaos. That's just the feeling they were going for, to feel trapped with Joker. The battle scenes used shutter sync disruption to mess with your brain. I'm sure we all felt a bit off while watching the Vietnam combat scenes. Like your brain was vibrating but your eyes couldn't keep up? That was Douglas Milsome deliberately jacking with the camera's shutter sync like an engineered disorientation. So here's what they did. Milsome threw the film camera shutter out of sync with the movement. It's a bold move because normally you sync the camera shutter perfectly with the film's frame rate to keep everything buttery smooth. But Milsome thought, why not let chaos leak through the lens? That resulted in the movements looking jittery, sharp, almost ghostly, especially when bullets fly and bodies hit the dirt. It's like your brain keeps trying to catch up, but it never can. This technique created a kind of subconscious discomfort, like you're seeing a warped memory from hell. And it worked so well that other filmmakers stole it later. You've probably seen it in music videos, war dramas, even some video games. But Kubrick and Milsome did it first, and they did it with analog gear and a whole lot of guts. The sex scene with Joker. So here's a juicy behind-the-scenes tidbit. Kubrick actually filmed a brief sex scene between Joker and a prostitute. If you're juggling your brain to remember, relax. It didn't make the cut in the actual film. It was just one of the scenes that was deleted. Kubrick felt it totally messed with the movie's mood. Full Metal Jacket is famously emotionally cold and detached, like a cinematic ice bath. But that scene threatened to thaw everything out. Kubrick wanted the audience to feel the emotional distance and the numbness of war, not a warm-up with a moment of connection. The sex scene might have humanized Joker too much. Kubrick was known for this kind of tough love with his edits. He once said movies should have emotional coherence above all else, and this scene just didn't fit the tone he was crafting. So, the scene ended up on the cutting room floor, leaving us with Joker's story told through grim humor and detachment. The footage still exists in some archives, so the curious can peek into what might have been a slightly warmer, but ultimately less Kubrickian Full Metal Jacket. Papillon Susu's line sparked a cultural firestorm. Here's one of those wild pop culture crossovers you don't see coming. Papillon Susu, the actress who played the prostitute in Full Metal Jacket, delivered some lines that sparked something way bigger than the film. Those lines were sampled in 2 Live Crew's infamous rap track, Me So Horny. That cheeky, provocative hook in the song is lifted straight from Full Metal Jacket's deleted prostitute scene dialogue. The song exploded in the late 80s and early 90s, known for its raunchy, over-the-top style. We don't call that controversial. We call that legally challenged. In Florida, Me So Horny was declared legally obscene. This was a huge deal because it sparked one of the landmark battles over freedom of speech in the USA. Now, even though the ban was later lifted, the whole saga became a defining moment for artistic expression. Talk about a cameo with impact. The wild, real-life drama of Gustav Hasford. Can you imagine co-writing a brilliant screenplay for one of cinema's most iconic war films, and just as the nominations roll out, you're in jail? That was Gustav Hasford's reality. The guy who penned the gritty, darkly poetic script didn't have a smooth Hollywood ride at all. Hasford got arrested for stealing a staggering 10,000 books from libraries. But why turn into some book bandit, you may feel? Well, the reasons remain murky. Some say it was a compulsive obsession. Others speculate he wanted to preserve or hoard knowledge. Whatever the motive, it landed him behind bars just as the Oscar nominations were announced for Full Metal Jacket. Talk about a wild timing clash. Despite the legal mess, Hasford's screenplay, co-written with Michael Herr and Stanley Kubrick itself, was critically praised, even earning a film nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay. But Hasford couldn't bask in the Hollywood limelight. It's a reminder that genius and chaos sometimes walk hand in hand. Hasford's life was a jumble of literary brilliance and turbulence, much like the fractured soldiers in his script. The story behind the story adds another layer of complexity to this already intense film. Kubrick nearly said no to Modine being at his son's birth. Actors sure do face all kinds of drama on set, But Matthew Modine's experience during Full Metal Jacket takes the cake. When his wife went into labor, Modine asked Kubrick for a simple request to be allowed to attend the birth of his son. You'd think a human moment like that would be a no-brainer, right? Not with Kubrick. Kubrick, known for his ironclad control and perfectionism, nearly refused Modine permission. The director wanted Modine on set, fully focused. But Modine was not about to miss that moment. The story goes that Modine literally threatened to harm himself by cutting himself, just to prove how serious he was. It shocked Kubrick enough to back down. In the end, Modine made it to the hospital in time for the birth of his son. It's a wild behind-the-scenes moment that shows Kubrick's ruthless work ethic, but also humanizes the toll it took on his actors. Even under a legendary filmmaking machine, real life doesn't stop. And sometimes, it takes drastic measures for a father-to-be to fight his way to a hospital room instead of a movie set. Modi versus D'Onofrio. When Strasberg clashed with Adler and magic happened. So here's a little secret from Full Metal Jacket set drama. Matthew Modine, Joker, and Vincent D'Onofrio, Private Pile, didn't exactly vibe off-screen. You see, these two came from opposite ends of the acting universe. Modine was all about Strasberg's method acting. Think deep dives into personal emotion, even living the role 24/7. Meanwhile, D'Onofrio repped the Adler technique, which emphasizes imagination and spontaneity over emotional memory. Imagine these two at craft services, one brooding quietly, the other improvising wild backstories. Reportedly, they wanted to avoid working with each other as much as possible because their acting philosophies were almost like oil and water. This off-screen tension must have actually fueled their on-screen chemistry. The awkwardness, frustration, all trickled into the characters' relationship. It's ironic, right? Two guys trying to dodge each other gave us one of the most iconic duos in war movie history. Joker's Jacket Tribute. Look closely at Joker's iconic jacket in Full Metal Jacket, and you'll spot the name J.T. Davis embroidered on it. Specialist James T. Davis was among the first officially confirmed U.S. soldiers killed in action during the Vietnam War. Kubrick and the film's creators included his name to ground the movie's brutal fiction in reality. This small detail adds a chilling layer to Joker's character. In a film saturated with dark humor and cynical commentary, this quiet nod humanizes the chaos. It's like the jacket whispers a solemn, "Remember me," amid the chaos of war. Is Full Metal Jacket based on Rambo? Many people think that is true, but actually, this movie was nowhere related or inspired by Rambo. There are a few surface-level similarities in both films, like the Vietnam-era soldiers or war scenes, but the fact is that Stanley Kubrick intentionally made Full Metal Jacket as his answer to Rambo. He took it as a challenge to the fantasy-laced war drama trend, with the aim of showing the harsh, dehumanizing reality of military life. Full Metal Jacket is actually adapted from Gustav Hasford's 1979 novel, The Short-Timers. Kubrick and co-writer Michael Herr shaped it into a two-part psychological meat grinder that punches through basic war film conventions. So yes, Kubrick was consciously reacting against the Rambo style, not borrowing from it. The reach-around line that almost didn't make it past Kubrick's poker face. One of the most famously hilarious moments in Full Metal Jacket came totally off script and it nearly got cut. The drill sergeant who improvised a ton of his legendary insults threw out a line about a reach-around. When Ermey first said it, Kubrick paused the whole shoot and stared at him, poker-faced. The director asked Ermey to explain what the heck a reach-around even meant. Imagine the tension in that room. But then Kubrick broke out laughing. That impromptu line nailed the humor that permeates the barracks scenes, and Kubrick knew it was gold. So instead of cutting it, Kubrick kept the reach-around insult right in the final cut. It's now one of those iconic moments where raw personality and sharp wit smash perfectly into Kubrick's cold war machine. This scene shows that even the perfectionist Kubrick had a sense of humor and trusted Ermey's gut. Sometimes the best lines come from the chaos and a little crude creativity. Marvelous verdict. And there you have it. Proof that Full Metal Jacket wasn't just a movie. It was a cinematic landmine of bizarre truths and behind-the-scenes chaos. I bet you didn't know most of these, like rejecting plastic leaves like a jungle snob, or Modine threatening self-harm just to see his baby born, to a reach-around joke that nearly got sniped by Kubrick's poker face. It's clear this wasn't your average war film. Every shot, every insult, every stitch on Joker's jacket had purpose. So which fact did you find most surprising? Did we miss anything on the list? Do let us know in the comments section below. And if you've enjoyed this breakdown, do hit the like and subscribe button so we can bring you more such trivia. Until then, stay sharp and stay safe. We'll catch you in the next one. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe, and thanks everyone.